And part of the reason, Seth, that you are here is that you are someone who, at the time of the acquisition, were not overly enthusiastic about it. And it wasn't even just the, I don't want to get rid of Marcus Smart, I love Marcus, all of that, like a lot of fans felt, didn't want to see Smart go. It was the, I don't like this ad. I don't, like, if you're going to trade Smart, you're going to trade Smart. I don't specifically like acquiring Kristaps Porzingis. So now that you've seen him for a couple of games, real games, never mind the preseason, who cares about that? Real games, what have you thought?
So on the positive side, this team desperately needs people who catch the ball and immediately do something with it. And I think he's had a lot of success. Like his ability to stretch the floor beyond the 3-point line. I think the big shot down the stretch against New York that you mentioned is a really good example of this. He's positioned a couple feet beyond the 3-point line on that one. He catches the ball and it goes up immediately. There's no like hemming and hawing about like whether it's a good shot. He doesn't wait for the closeout. He knows his job is to like catch the ball and shoot the open shot. And while I'd like everybody on the team to be making really quick decisions around like passing and moving the ball, I think that, when in trading in getting rid of guys like Smart, Grant Williams, and even Rob to a certain degree, and adding Drew and Kristaps, you're adding you've gotten rid of 3 like what I would consider to be plus passers, and added like a decent passer for a guard, but not. I don't think Drew is like above average as a passer for a guard, and I would say Kristaps is actually kind of a negative as a passer, and so. I've been worried about the collective passing of the team, but I think I did underrate a little bit his ability. Like just this, like the stretching the floor just adds like a quick decision that can be made. They can just like chuck it out to him and he's ready to jack it up and nobody can bother his shot. So that's been really good.
Celtics Beat is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
What's up, everyone? Welcome in. New edition of Celtics Beat. Great to have you here with us. Adam Kaufman, Evan Valenti is back, and Seth Landman's here, of course, via the group chat, but also a good friend of this program. And I wanted to have him on for this specific show for very particular reasons, but we'll get to those in just a moment. First, just a few things that I'd like to say. For one, if you missed any of the last show that I did, it feels like an eternity ago, so I apologize if you are a diehard listener of this show. And actually, I'd like to thank anyone out there that is. We always tell you a little too late in the show. Maybe you've tuned out by then, but do check out the podcast, rate, review, most importantly, subscribe, all that good stuff. Celtics Beat is available wherever you get your podcasts, be it Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, you name it. Obviously, the CLNS Media YouTube page, if you prefer looking at us while we ramble on as opposed to just listening to us while you're out, like Evan, walking a dog and listening to your podcast and doing whatever it is that you do. But I do want to thank those of you out there. I've seen some people on social media here very recently with, I don't know why this ever circulates, but it does every so often, kind of beginning of a new season, midway through a year, right around playoffs, that type of thing. It happens a few times a year where someone will randomly tweet out, hey, what are your favorite Celtics podcasts? And fortunately, I'm honestly, I'm astounded that occasionally, we will get, added, if you will, on Twitter or X, whatever the kids call it now. People will respond and they will mention me, mention Ev, mention Celtics Beat. And I'm honestly, I'm always surprised that anyone listens to this show. So it's wonderful, truly. Like it means so much to me that anyone would include us in that conversation as being your Celtics, go-to podcast. So thank you for that. And if you are one of the people out there that did mention us, just know, and because you're obviously listening, you're our favorite listener. So wow. Thank you for that. I know it's
not like there's like a lot of them out there either. You know what I mean? It's not like it's there's not a lot of Celtics podcasts in the space.
It's not at all an incredibly oversaturated space.
No.
Well, that was heartwarming.
He has like 9 of them. So
I mean, we do love our fans, so I love interacting with people in the comment section as much as anybody. It's part of like one of my favorite things about the show.
Let's curb the word fans. Like I'm not sure
anyone fans. I don't care if you hate on us the entire time. I'm
not sure anyone is a fan of mine. We have listeners or viewers, and I appreciate that again greatly. I also wanted to just continually scratch a couple of itches here. I wanted to mention that if you missed any of the last show that I did, like I said, feels like a long time ago. I guess it kind of was. Drew Carter joined me. He is the new television voice of the Celtics. He is the successor to Mike Gorman. He is certainly not replacing him. No one can, but he is the successor to Mike Gorman. He will be doing road games this year, which means depending on when you are listening to this show, today is Sunday as we record, but if you're listening to this on your drive to work Monday morning, well, one, hi from the past, and two, he is doing tonight's game. It is the first road game of the year that is not opening night. So Drew will be on the call. Mike Gorman naturally did opening night in New York, as you would expect, but Drew will be on the call tonight. So look forward to checking him out with Scal. And obviously he did games during the preseason, but if you've not had the opportunity yet, just really enjoyed getting to know him a little bit. We talked a ton before the show, after the show, obviously during for about an hour about his road to joining the Celtics broadcast. And I mean, a 26-year-old kid living a lot of people's dream jobs. It's just a pretty incredible thing, and a really, I can say, genuinely, just a good guy. And so obviously, you'll be watching anyway, I assume, and so enjoy the broadcast. But let's get to this here, which is the Celtics are sitting at 2-0, which basically means that as of right now, Boston, Orlando, Indiana, Dallas, New Orleans, they're all equal. They're all 2-0. The only one we will omit is the Denver Nuggets, the defending champs, because with their win earlier tonight, an absolute throttling, I should mention, over Oklahoma City, handing
on the road.
Yeah, handing OKC their first loss of the year, or its first loss. Now 3-0, the Denver Nuggets, and that just continues to be an absolute monster. And I know Seth here, that's his Western Conference team. He's almost as big probably a Nuggets fan as he is a Celtics fan. So we can talk about both those teams a little bit here. But guys, I want to, just to start us off here, and we'll save like the thesis for a little bit later. This is just sort of the Cliff notes to Cliff's notes, right? There's an S there.
Cliff's notes, I think.
Cliff's notes.
Cliff notes.
Isn't it Cliff's notes?
No S there, buddy.
I think there is. Google it. I'm not kidding. I'm not saying it like belongs to some dude, Cliff. I think the term is Cliff's Notes. Seriously. It's not like Ruth's Steakhouse, but I think it's Cliff's Notes. Is it not? Let's look it up. Somebody look it up while I'm rambling
Cliff's,
on.
It is Cliff's Notes. There's an S.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm actually shocked by this. I thought I was wrong as I was saying it.
See, well, now we
really crushed this one.
Yeah, we're educating our listeners at the same time. So don't go sounding like an a-hole saying Cliff Notes when you're talking to people, because, well, one, they'll think you're right, but two, you'll be wrong. All right, where I was going with this, for Christ's sake, is that my main takeaway from these two games, and I want each of yours as well, and then we'll dive deeper. But my main takeaway so far, the thing that I am most happy with, we can get to what's upset us or whatever too, but to start on a high note, because they're 2-0, the thing that pleases me most is that this team, while a new collection of people, obviously a new core outside of the Jays largely, they have still really battled through some early adversity here and not crumbled. Not only not crumbled, but found a way, while blowing leads, big leads, coming back from deficits late in games and closing strong. And that obviously, Seth, is the mark of a championship team. Doesn't mean Boston's going to win this year. Hopefully that does happen. But that is a characteristic that you look for. And the fact that that is happening already with a team that just got together, and it's happened in both games. Neither one was a blowout. It happened in both games. That to me is really reassuring.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. It was like sort of a common refrain to talk about how this team struggled to win games when they didn't make threes last year. And they've won the first two games of the season this year, even though the other team shot a higher percentage on threes in both cases. So hard not to be pleased with that. It's true. I mean, Yeah, there were moments where things weren't going well. A lot of those moments were self-inflicted, I think, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But yeah, they came through in crunch time in both instances, and that's been a pretty clear weakness for a while. So hard to not be pleased with that.
That's mine, but what's one for you? What's stood out
positive
from these first two games?
I think for a positive, I'd like to focus on Derek White. I think I just his play at point guard. I think he more than anyone. They're struggling to move the ball a bit this year, and we'll definitely get into that. I think he's one of the things that really gets them moving and gets them into good places. I also think what he's doing on defense right now is some of these. I mean, the spectacular plays go without saying. You can watch these chase down blocks like. You can count on one hand the number of guys in the league who are capable of some of these plays. But yeah, just his general IQ on the court and his ability to stay in front of people on defense and just make the right play over and over again, coupled with his quick decision making. I just feel like this team is so lucky they traded for him, and that I feel totally comfortable with him being the point guard moving forward. Yeah.
I feel like I should just offer to get it out of the way, the mea culpa, and I will credit Seth, and part of the reason that you're here so early in the season as well. I said on this show a number of times that I did not believe that after the acquisition of Drew Holiday that Derek White was going to be starting. Didn't mean he was never going to start, but I figured he would come off the bench more than not, and that Al was going to be part of the starting five. I never even considered Drew Holiday coming off the bench being the sixth man. Could happen at some point, but it was always to me either Al or Derek, and I just thought they would be inclined to go bigger, and it was going to be Derek White coming off the bench. And to this point, through two games, and the preseason for that matter, flat out wrong. Did not have it. I was, no chance. And you from the get-go, Seth, have been advocating, not just advocating, but strongly believing that White would remain in the starting lineup. So one, hats off to you on that. And two, Ev, what's your positive?
Well, it's hard not to be impressed with just the overall balance and the firepower of this starting five. I mean, they've had a Jason Tatum night, they've had a Kristaps Porzingis night, they've had a Derek White night, they've had a Jaylen Brown night. I mean, they've really done they're so top heavy, and it's overwhelming to a lot of teams. I mean, that's Miami and New York both played really well. I thought New York got a great contribution from their bench, and like Brunson and Julius Randle were awful in that game, and Boston needed every bit of the 30 that Kristaps gave him, the 34 that Tatum gave him, and then you can move on. And now it's Derek White and Jaylen Brown. It's like, geez, this is just a wealth of offensive talent, and you look at, and it's going to be one of these things, I think, all season long. And again, one of the big reasons why we have Seth on the show is because he can speak, I think, just to how awesome Denver is. Not too many teams can throw out a lineup like that. And I think Boston clearly has Denver on the brain a little bit in terms of we need to match their firepower. And so far, their firepower is really, really, really impressive. There's so many other little things too, like the Drew Holiday defensive experience has just been literally wonderful. I just love watching him play defense, and he has clearly, ways to go in terms of getting more comfortable with this team. But the amount of bodies on this team, and their bench hasn't played well yet. Like they just haven't had a terrific shooting night from 3-point range yet. They haven't had a lot of bench contributors yet to their scoring output. But dang, this team can really, really play offense with pretty much every team in the league, and it's going to be okay.
Let's build off Porzingis as kind of a jumping off point with that, because he is, again, 2-game sample size, but he had, statistically speaking, at least in the points category, he had the best debut of anyone in Celtics history. No one had ever scored 30 points in his first game as a member of the Celtics. And as Ev said, C's needed every last one of them, including that huge 3-pointer, obviously, in the final moments of that game to really cement the win. Through these 2 games, he's played 34 minutes per. He's averaging about 24 points, 8.5 rebounds. He's getting a couple steals, blocking about 3 shots, as significant as anything, obviously, outside of protecting the rim and playing very solid defense and the fluidity of the offense that can move around him and what he can do in terms of spacing and all of that. He's shooting about 52% from the field, 47% from three, 86% from the free throw line. I know we're talking about 2 games, but obviously the lines that I have read off, very, very strong to start. And part of the reason, Seth, that you are here is that you are someone who, at the time of the acquisition, were not overly enthusiastic about it. And it wasn't even just the, I don't want to get rid of Marcus Smart, I love Marcus, all of that, like a lot of fans felt, didn't want to see Smart go. It was the, I don't like this ad. I don't like, if you're going to trade Smart, you're going to trade Smart. I don't specifically like acquiring Kristaps Porzingis. So now that you've seen him for a couple of games, real games, never mind the preseason, who cares about that? Real games, what have you thought?
So on the positive side, this team desperately needs people who catch the ball and immediately do something with it. And I think he's had a lot of success. Like, his ability to stretch the floor beyond the 3-point line. I think the big shot down the stretch against New York that you mentioned is a really good example of this. He's positioned a couple feet beyond the 3-point line on that one. He catches the ball and it goes up immediately. There's no like hemming and hawing about like whether it's a good shot. He doesn't wait for the closeout. He knows his job is to like catch the ball and shoot the open shot. And while I'd like everybody on the team to be making really quick decisions around like passing and moving the ball, I think that, when in trading in getting rid of guys like Smart, Grant Williams, and even Rob to a certain degree, and adding Drew and Kristaps, you're adding you've gotten rid of 3, like what I would consider to be plus passers, and added like a decent passer for a guard, but I don't think Drew is like above average as a passer for a guard. And I would say Kristaps is actually kind of a negative as a passer. And so I've been worried about the collective passing of the team, but I think I did underrate a little bit his ability. Like just this, like the stretching the floor just adds like a quick decision that can be made. They can just like chuck it out to him and he's ready to jack it up and nobody can bother his shot. So that's been really good. The other thing that's sort of, I thought that if he was healthy, he would do a good job protecting the rim. I think we've seen that as in his career. I think when he struggled in that role in Dallas, he was often hurt. So I think he's really good protecting the rim. It has been interesting in the early going this year how the game that he had against Bam Adebayo, where Bam kind of was able to do whatever he wanted on offense against Porzingis, and they really kind of won the game down the stretch with Horford coming in for Porzingis. I thought that sort of began to expose some of the weakness. Like while he's a great rim protector, he brings weaknesses that this team has traditionally avoided. The Celtics have really tried to avoid having any of those weaknesses. So they're having some problems with defensive rebounding now. They're having some problem. They're still not forcing turnovers. Some of those things I think are things we'll need to keep an eye on as the season goes on, as they learn how to play defense around this different type of player.
It's safe to say you've enjoyed the KP experience though?
Oh yeah. I mean, the offensive spacing you get with a guy that can really knock down threes at that kind of clip from that kind of range, it's just going to be hilarious to watch. I mean, I did a little mini lap of a victory lap after the first game when the last couple of minutes of the game boiled down to Tatum KP 2-man game. And I'm like, this is what I've been trying to tell people for a while. Like, I think Porzingis is brought in to be a little bit more helpful in the crunch time offense at the end of games. Like instead of it being Jalen and Jason, the KP adds a way different wrinkle to this. And I think Jalen, if you go back to that game-winning shot, basically that Kristaps hit, like he's wide open in the corner. He's one pass away if we need to go that far. But at the same time, like Porzingis is 7'4", and he's probably going to shoot over a guy that's much smaller than him if he's going to try and attack that closeout. And he's a good enough shooter to where like that's just a really devastating play. And so how they play off of that as the season progresses is going to be interesting to me. And I think it's just going to be devastating for a lot of teams to handle. Now, Miami is uniquely equipped maybe to handle something like that with the way Bam can guard in space. But not too many teams are going to be able to handle that particular pick and roll or pick and pop option. So the KP experience, the blocks, the defense interior, like that's been a big plus to me. I didn't expect them to be that dominant. And to make their defense look way different. Like the Celtics lead the league in blocks per game with 8.5, which is pretty outrageous. Considering, like, I know it's 2 games, but still, it's
without Rob Williams.
Yeah, without Rob, they're allowing like the least amount of points per game inside the paint so far this year. Like that's, and then they have, never mind that, they have 2 unbelievable defensive guards, and Tatum's a plus defender in my opinion. So they really have like just a really interesting core of guys defensively. If Kristaps is going to hold up inside the way he has in that one game against the Knicks, like that's going to be really, really interesting, because maybe I sold this team short defensively is all I'll say. Like we laud Derek White and Drew Holiday for a very good reason. But if Kristaps is going to hold up inside like that, that's a whole different wrinkle that this team defensively hasn't had, just because Rob has never really been healthy. And we only saw Rob unlocked that year as like a rover. This is a little bit different than that. So I'm really curious to see how that progresses.
Guys, I keep saying this. I feel like I have to keep saying it, which is it's a 2-game sample size. You know, that cannot be obviously understated. You know, or it's a very important footnote to the successes the team has had. So again,
totally.
The fact that it's a 2-game sample size, I want you to remove the results, meaning the win-loss. Like, forget their 2-0 and just look at the games and how they've been played, the, you know, ruts that they have experienced kind of in those third, early fourth quarters, and obviously finishing these games out strong as they have with, you know, I think so long as they're healthy and they get another clean sheet for this Monday game in Washington, it's, you know, as long as obviously this team can remain unscathed and generally unaffected, not load managing, they're as good 1 through 6 as anybody else in the league. A little bit of depth issues after that, and we can talk about that, but 1 through 6, they're as good as anybody. That being said, have you felt in watching, beyond your own personal biases, have you felt in watching that they have missed Marcus Smart at all?
I really have, actually. So I'll point to I think the main thing I would point to with this team is that what has ailed them in big playoff games for the past 2 seasons is half-court offense. And despite everything Evan said that's totally true about the Tatum-Porzingis 2-man game, this team gets bogged down in the mud. They just like... What happens when you decrease your overall level of collective passing is that guys stand around wondering what to do with the ball and try to attack. You know, early in the Miami game, Jalen tried to attack Bam Adebayo off the dribble a few times, and it really kept not going well. And it was later in the game when they started getting the ball moving side to side more. You see what happens when Jalen attacks when there's any advantage already. It's over. He gets a bucket. But when he tries to attack one-on-one against a great defender, or even worse, tries to drive into the teeth of the defense, it isn't the same way. He won't have the same success rate. And so I'm obsessed with this passing thing. And so tonight before I came on, I decided to look up, like, I was like, am I right about this? How many passes are they throwing? Like, just, and they're last in the league in passes per game, and 45 passes per game down from last season. And so I do think there's, these are regular season games. They're pulling out wins. Obviously, like, when this team is healthy, as you just said, Adam, the talent level is so high that it might not matter, but they're not going to, they really are not going to win in the playoffs the way they're playing offense right now. And so the question is, can they capture like what they found like more in the second half against Miami offensively, and can they get the ball moving? And so when I think about them missing Marcus Smart, I just think kind of like Derek White, he was another guy. I know people complained about the shooting and stuff, but he was a really good passer. And when nothing was going on, he'd like go down in the post and try to post up and get something that way. Or he'd just shoot the open shot that was there and not like not like be like wondering about it. And so I think that stuff really matters, just quick decisions. And I think it's a weakness for this team right now.
Can I push back on that though? Because I feel like,
sure.
What are the things that people talked about in terms of like, what are they going to miss Marcus Smart the most for? Well, his leadership in the locker room, his heart on the team, and, passing has been, I think, the only thing I would say in terms of what did they miss about Marcus Smart is that. I don't think this team has had any problem getting any passion from anywhere. It seems like to me, Derek White was fired up the other night. And I
don't even care about the passion stuff.
But that's the stuff that people talked about. Though this team might slip defensively because they don't have Marcus Smart here. There, I don't think that's been a really big issue so far at all. Jrue Holiday, again, watching Jrue Holiday stonewall Julius Randle all game was the most fun I think I've had in a long time. It was hysterical. They don't, his leadership. Yeah, Marcus was a great leader. I'm not saying he wasn't, but it seems like to me that Jalen and Jason have stepped up a little bit in terms of, communicating internally. And this team seems to be really focused right now. So I don't think that's been a problem. Like
totally
the intangible things about Marcus Smart that you thought you would miss, I don't think they miss the passing stuff. Yeah, sure. And I think that's going to take some time. I think, getting Jrue Holiday a little more integrated in this team is going to make a big difference. I think figuring out what their bench rotation is going to be is going to make a big difference for this team. But outside of that one aspect, they haven't missed Marcus Smart at all. I think they've actually been a little bit more fine-tuned than I expected, considering how big of a part of the team he was. And I think they've carried on pretty well with him on a different team.
I agree 100% with everything you just said. I don't think they miss. First of all, I didn't really think they would miss those. Like when I was worried about losing Marcus Smart, it was like 95% about the fact that they were bringing in someone who I think is a bad passer and getting rid of someone who's a good passer. But I do. So I don't I think this team is going to be fine in terms of like leadership and like energy and things like that. I am literally just worried about ball movement. And I think, I don't know. It's like the one piece with this team where I'm not just like, defensive rebounding. I think they're going to figure out as the season goes along, like the stuff with like learning how to play this a more drop style and being in rotation more and figuring out how to rebound around that. That stuff's going to be fine as the season goes on. But the ball movement thing with this team, it's just, I feel like I've been complaining about this for years now, specifically in tight games. That's like when it happens in tight games against good teams, this team tends to slow down. I'm really encouraged by what I saw down the stretch against Miami. I think they found some stuff they needed to find. I do wonder what happens if Porzingis doesn't foul out and they don't go to Horford down the stretch. I think there's some matchups where Porzingis is a little vulnerable, but yeah, what you said about Marcus, I totally agree. Like I value all that stuff, the intangibles, but I don't think those are the things they'll miss about him at all.
Well, obviously the personnel is not going to change, barring something weird happening mid-season. But this is your core, and I don't think anybody's complaining about that. I bring that up just to say, in terms of correcting the things you would like to see corrected, how does it change? How does it evolve, you think?
This is an ongoing question for years with the Jays, I think, and I've said this on the podcast before, and so I don't fully blame them for it even. I think when you're a great player in the NBA and it's a tight game against a good team, especially when the stakes are high in the playoffs, your instinct is to try to fix it, right? Like what they want to do is take control because that's how they've had success in the past. And they want to make plays happen and for their teammates. Like, I don't think they're selfish players. I don't think any of that. I just think it's their instinct to try to fix it themselves. And I think in basketball, I think if you're going to take a lesson from the Nuggets winning the championship, it's that your best, like when Jokic has a problem, when things are difficult on offense for the Nuggets, he immediately looks for a teammate. How can I get into a 2-man game with a teammate? How can I how do I go screen for this guy so that he gets an open look? Like, what can I do to just make something easy happen and like loosen up the court? And that's what moving the ball does. And I think the Celtics instinct is to like kind of get tight and like figure out how they can make it happen on their own. The second they get away from that, they will have this team will the offense will flow like it was flowing in the preseason or like it was flowing at the first couple months of last season. They have it in them. It'll happen when it happens.
I don't know. I think this team is going to take some time to get to know each other, and I think the fact that they're 2-0 already is incredible, especially against 2 playoff teams.
They're playing. They've these are great wins. I don't know. I mean, I'm just still seeing the offense get bogged down in the same old ways. They're so talented that they're going to beat a ton of teams anyway. But I guess with this team, I think you both would agree that the fish this team has to fry comes later. It's in the playoffs. These regular season, they're going to win 50 something games and be a high seed. We already know where this is going. And so I'm just looking for what are Missoula talked a lot before the season started about this team needing a curveball kind of isolation basketball that's not the curveball.
Yeah.
So
and we talked about a pre-show stuff. Their isolation numbers. Kaufman, they have the most unassisted 2-point makes in the league at 70% of their 2-point makes are unassisted. It's a staggering number. That's not great.
No, it's not just two. So last year I looked this up. Last year they were 5th in the league, 70.3 points per game off assists. Right now, again, Kaufman, I know 2 games, small sample size, 28th in the league, 51 points off assists. So it's almost 20 fewer points per game off assists.
The Bucks are below them, aren't they?
Yeah, but the Bucks want to play the Bucks have Dame Lillard. They want to play ISO ball, right?
I'm just pointing it out. The Bucks are worse than they are, and I think the Hornets are dead last, maybe.
Yeah, no, I mean, and OKC is going to be low on that list too, even though they've been they lost to Denver today, but they've been relatively successful offensively. But I would argue that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a better purely isolation scorer than anyone the Celtics have. So I don't know. I just think that when the Celtics offense sings, it's because the ball is moving. And so that's going to be the thing I'm just always looking for with this team. And I love that they can grind out wins with defense and and actually they're probably going to be a much more efficient as the season goes on isolation scoring team than they were last year. Even I do think Holiday's better at that than Marcus. They've made upgrades in that area, but the ball's got to move.
Let me tell you guys something I care about. If I'm not mistaken, I'd have to double check the numbers. This team is 1-0-1 against the spread, Ev. Let's thank our fine sports book folks for making this show possible.
Yeah, we'll take a quick break. Today's show is powered by FanDuel. Snap into the action this NFL season and NBA season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time. You get on the action. It's app's super easy to use, wide range of betting options, spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. We talked about this, boys, early on in the season, and they haven't moved. There's been a new front runner, I think, added to the group. But, I think it's important that we have Seth on this particular podcast to just, again, Nikola Jokic is plus 430 to win MVP. It's sitting right there for everybody. He's just the best player in the league, and he should have won it 3 years in a row. Should probably win it again. He's amazing. I'm going to keep hammering that pretty much every show because until it gets down to the 200 level, plus 430 for that is incredible. Just jump on the opportunity while it's good right now. That's all I'm going to tell you. But it's so far, a lot of these cross sport ones that I like to do where you bet the money line of a NBA game, money line of an NFL game, try to double dip, so to speak. I've been enjoying that. If people want to partake with me on that, so visit FanDuel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season and tip off the NBA season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
So, Ev, you were just talking obviously about Jokic and MVP potential, and of course, if he's healthy, he should always just perennially be in that conversation. also another thing, going back to, whether or not it was a concern with Smart leaving, passion, and all of that stuff. So one thing that I've really enjoyed these first couple of games, and it's not new, we've seen it plenty. I just wonder if we will get to see it consistently throughout this year, this entire season. First couple games so far, we have seen a very passionate, aggressive MVP campaign incoming kind of year or start from Jason Tatum. He has just been a man on a mission. Now, how much of that is individual accolades versus knowing fully, not like he didn't know it before, but this is his team. He's the guy. He's all NBA. People have him in the MVP conversation. Some people have him as the, their choice to win. He's not obviously the odds-on pick to win, but their choice to win. And this team has as high expectations as it has had, probably since, really, truly the highest expectations for this team since Gordon Hayward, Kyrie Irving arrived, and maybe the year after when Hayward was presumed healthy at that point in time, and all the depth and talent they had on that 18-19 team. But certainly of Tatum being the guy and Brown being the $300 million man, these guys at this point in time, this we always talk about star players in the NBA and what their peak years look like. Now that these guys are basically entering those peak years, and there's no questioning what they've been through, what they've accomplished in this league, and what they still have in front of them, I feel like we're seeing a little something different in attitude, in just general demeanor on the floor from Tatum in particular, Seth, that I am, it takes my breath away. I'm loving every second of it.
My favorite little manifestation of this with him is that, because I do think they've struggled a little bit with defensive rebounding for the first two games, but it's not and a lot of that is, Porzingis is protecting the rim. He goes for a block. You gotta, it's like they got to build some habits of crashing the glass, like when the rim protector is out of the paint like that. But Tatum has had a bunch of big rebounds where he's come back in to crash. And I think he's kind of the one on the team that takes that job the most seriously. That this team led the league in defensive rebounding rate last year, and I think he's the biggest reason why that was true then. I love that he takes that so seriously, and that he knows the value. When you think about his career, that he came in the league as a rookie. Obviously, he was a flawed player as a rookie, as all rookies are. But it's a cliche in the NBA that rookies don't help you win. But that wasn't true of him. He came in the league as a guy who made small, subtle things happen on the basketball court that helped teams win. And I think he gets underrated a little bit sometimes as a superstar because you can point to other guys who are better isolation scorers, or other guys who are better step back three shooters, or other guys who his game is made up of all these subtleties and a total lack of weaknesses. That I think, I just love to see him doing the little stuff that wins games. When your superstar is doing that stuff, coming back to crash the defensive glass, whatever it is. That's really exciting stuff for a team trying to win the title.
The thing I think is interesting is the fact that before they got Drew Holiday, I thought Tatum would lead the team in assists. And I should have been a little bit different. Tatum's going to lead this team in rebounding, I think. And that's, like I said, that's a really important stat for a superstar. It's a really important stat for a guy on the wing, too, to lead this team in rebounding. It's clearly something he really cares about. Every defensive possession is finished with a defensive rebound. I think he takes that really seriously. And I think given the ability of some of the other guys too, I think they have the potential to be a really good rebounding team as we continue on here. But he's going to be a big reason why they are, is because he cares. He cares a lot about that. And Porzingis, I think, Seth, you were a little worried about his rebounding numbers coming into the season. If I was going to be so honest about it, but I think Jalen and Jason can help make up for that again with this some of the scheming, the ways they can scheme around that. But Tatum. An absolute
to your point, if they're going to want Porzingis, your center can't do everything. If you want your center to be trying to block shots at the rim,
right,
you're going to have wings come crash. Porzingis has been fine with the rebounding. I think the team's getting used to learning how to play in rotation because the thing with Porzingis is that it means you have to play this like different style of defense. They can't switch the same way, which means they're in rotation a little more. But yeah, I just think, it's not just Tatum getting the rebounds. It's that it's having your best player make that kind of like selfless play that bleeds into everybody. I think it's a little bit related. Did it feel to you guys like O'Shea Brissett got? I love what he did in the Miami game, but it felt like he was getting almost too much credit for the energy he brought.
I think it's important that Tatum acknowledged it though. Like
it's great, but I did find myself being like, man, Tatum he does this stuff all the time, and people act like he's a bum. Like, I don't know. Like I feel like there isn't. The narrative around Tatum isn't that he's like a hard playing guy. And I think that's like kind of unfair. I think, I think he makes like tons of like really small, important plays that go unnoticed.
Did his ball handle look better this year? Like, I don't know. He seems a little bit quicker with it. That Knicks game in particular, I keep going back and thinking about how he would get to the rim kind of against the Knicks when he wanted to. There was that one on the left side. I think he had Quentin Grimes on him, and he does that like spin away from Quentin Grimes and then comes back to the right hand against Robinson and just like laid it up and under on the other side. Robinson fouled him for the and one. I was like, oh my goodness. Like, woo! It got me heated, got me excited. He had a couple of moves in that game where I'm like, man, he just looks a little quicker, a little more decisive, trying to get to the basket. Like, it just seems like he's processing faster, and that's going to be a huge part of his maturity, is just processing the game at a slightly quicker speed. And if he can do that to get to the basket, get to the free throw line, sky's the limit for him. I mean, he really is. He's a good enough shooter to bury anybody from anywhere. But the fact that he can get to the line or get to the rim consistently is what makes him a superstar. And if he can rack up fouls and not turn, problem is he has, some turnovers in there that aren't terrific, but you're going to have to balance that a little bit more. But I think he's been, the shooting the other night against Miami wasn't tremendous, but I'm still just thrilled with a little bit more low post action. Again, getting to the rim a little bit more. Like, that stuff's been very, very encouraging to me.
A couple other things I want to get to, guys, before we, get out of here. Don't keep people forever, but both fall under that ongoing 2 games theme. One, Jaylen Brown, who we have not talked a lot about. So, in the spirit of being sponsored by a sports book here, Ev, to me, the surest bet coming out of game 1 was when I saw Jaylen Brown's over-under for points at 19.5. That was an auto smash on the over. There was no question in my mind Jaylen Brown was going for 20 plus in that second game of the year. I'm not saying I foresaw 30 or whatever it was, but over 20. Absolutely. He had a rough game 1. He was going to bounce back offensively. They were going to make it a point to make sure he bounced back offensively, if for no other reason than, I don't know, early season confidence. But I saw some people, and I think this is overstating it, I saw some people, just social media or even talking heads, saying coming out of game 1, it was, man, like Jaylen Brown, he looks like a guy who doesn't really know what his role on this team is. He doesn't really know what his fit is with this newly formed group with Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. And to Evan's point, end of the game, the 2-man show with Porzingis and Tatum, not Brown being a part of that. What have you thought of what we've seen from Brown just, again, through 2 games?
Yeah, I mean, I think he did get lost a little bit offensively in game 1. And I also think it affected his defense in that game. I think he was a little, he's made strides in the last couple of years at being more and more like making better decisions off the ball as a defender. I thought there was some like backsliding in that area in the Knicks game. He was so locked in game 2 though. And I think, I don't know, this is one of the areas where I do think, as the season goes on, he'll become a little more comfortable with, like, they have more dominant ball handlers on the team than they did last year, which maybe like means slightly fewer opportunities for him. But if he if he thinks about that in the right way, it should just mean that he's able to attack one-on-one instead of having to drive into traffic. And even better, it should mean that he gets the ball on the second side and can attack a slight advantage. In that scenario, I really believe he's like one of the 5 best players in the league. When he's going to the basket against a slight advantage, there's very few people I'd rather have with the ball. And so I'm hoping that the Heat game was really encouraging because he got his points by not by forcing the issue, but by taking what the defense was giving him. And the more he does that, the more successful they're going to be. He's just so dominant as an off-ball scorer.
Yeah, he's going to need the biggest adjustment, I think, of all of them. It's going to take the longest time, the most adjustment for him to kind of figure out where he is, because Porzingis can have an impact, I think, a lot easier than Jalen can with this new crew. I mean, he's a pick and pop shooter. He has a huge size advantage down low if they ever want to do that. Jalen, I think, is going to have a hard time figuring out where he involves in the pecking order, involves in the flow of the offense. Like, I think Drew's easy, he'll figure it out. He's been around a long time. He's not one of those players that's really ball dominant. He's someone he's more malleable. Derek White, the reason why we love Derek White on this show in particular, we highlighted that he was the best plus minus guy of the team by a huge margin, because he's that type of guy. He's very malleable. He's just throw him in a situation, he'll figure it out. Jalen's going to have a hard time. And like Seth, I'm very encouraged by game 2. But there's obviously a long way to go here, but he could be absolutely ridiculous this year if they use him the right way and he attacks the right things. So that it should be really interesting to see how he progresses through the season. But I think it's going to take some time.
Small thing to look for with him that I'll just mention, when he so attacking Bam is like the bad version of this. It's like they get the switch and he doesn't have a mismatch and he tries to attack it anyway. But when he if they can get him in the paint against a smaller defender, or even anywhere within 20 feet against a smaller defender, he's one of the best in the league at making those shots as well. I'm hoping as the year goes on that he gets a little more picky about when he attacks, waiting for the right spot and having the patience to get the ball against the right matchup.
Yeah, might be one of
the
those.
only thing that I wanted to mention is, again, we were talking about depth, and I think we've done a good job of highlighting both positives and negatives. And one concern, again, extremely early on, is the 8-man rotation is filled out by Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard. That's, those are your 8 when healthy, in addition to obviously the top 6 that are your primary guys. Beyond that, Pritchard is going to have a role. We've talked a lot about that on this show. And Hauser is and should have a role. He's going to and should have a role. Through 2 games, and I'll go a little easy on Pritchard because he hit a couple of massive free throws the other night to help them close that win. But these 2 guys, and Hauser especially, through 2 games in terms of what you want from them coming in and serving their minutes. I mean, you're not looking to either of them obviously to be defensive stalwarts. You're looking for them to come in, make buckets. And if they're not going to do that, and Hauser in particular, if they're not going to do that, they're not going to see the floor. That's just the bottom line. And again, 2 games. So I'm not getting bent out of shape over this. I don't want anyone listening or watching to think that I am. It's just sort of something I have in the back of my head, because after those 2 guys, you don't have anyone else who can do what they can do. And if they aren't doing it, I'm talking about depth-wise, bench-wise, if they aren't doing it and you run into a situation, as every team does, where there's injuries, load management, all that stuff as the year goes along, you need to know that guys like that are capable of stepping up.
I guess they're going to have to hit shots. But the one pushback I would make is that I think both of those guys are known around the league at this point. Even though Pritchard didn't play a lot last year, those guys both get guarded on the perimeter. And so I think we might have to, there might be games where we have to kind of keep an eye on the plus minus with those guys more than their individual stats, because the truth is if Hauser or Pritchard is out there and it's just that the open shots are going to Derek White and Drew Holiday,
Sure.
like that ain't a bad thing at all.
Didn't Danny Ainge tell us plus minus is a bogus stat?
No, I'm like, and in one and two game samples, it's an incredibly bogus stat. But I would just like, I don't know. I'm having the same thoughts about those guys need to make shots, but it is on my radar to make sure I'm paying attention to how close are defenders to those two guys, and is the presence of Sam Hauser getting open looks for other guys while he's on the court? In which case, do I really care if Sam Hauser's the one making the shots or not? Like, not really. And I have a feeling the coaching staff is like looking at that stuff. I just think those guys get guarded. Like teams, they're in the scouting report. Like nobody's leaving Sam Hauser. So I don't know. Just something to think about.
Sure.
Yeah, you shoot over 40% from three in a season. I think people are taking record. They're paying attention. Yeah. I am curious to see, because this is the one thing that I've, if I have not concerns, it's just I want to see how this bench shakes out. Brissett comes in the other night and gives him some good energy. I haven't seen Keita really at all yet. I'm kind of pro Keita. I'm a very big pro Keita guy. I'm kind of hoping he gets an opportunity to showcase a little bit in the regular season. We haven't seen too much of Svi. I haven't seen any of Lamar Stevens. I thought it was pretty interesting that Hauser is pretty much locked in top 8. Like he hasn't wavered at all from that spot. I think that was interesting to give it to him versus two other guys that have been in the league a little bit longer than him. But again, if he makes shots, then that'll bear out probably okay. But if he's not making shots, I know the other two guys on the team, and then especially with Lamar Stevens can really guard. So I'm just curious how the rest of this bench rotation shakes out, because there's some guys on the bench that can contribute in different ways, right? It just depends what the game needs. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see, what buttons Joe presses. Like, again, I was thoroughly impressed that Peyton Pritchard came in. I thought it was a weird sub, but Pritchard came in at the end of that Knicks game and hit 2 ginormous free throws cold off the bench like that. That was a really interesting substitution, him for Porzingis, a guy that shoots free throws well and is a huge target. They just throw him the basketball. I know Pritchard was wide open when he caught it. Like, that worked out, but I usually would want the 7'4" guy out there I could just throw it up to, just in case things didn't go right.
Do you think they maybe don't? Is it possible they don't trust Porzingis' decision making in those moments?
Just hold on to the ball, dude. You were 9.
Just food for thought. Just food for thought.
Just hold the ball.
He's not sold yet, folks.
It was funny though. If you watch, because they took the 2 timeouts in a row, so they came back from commercial break. So let's go advance the ball. And on the side of the court, like you can see Pritchard's like just kind of jacked up and like jumping up and down. I'm like, why is like, man, I love Pritchard's energy. Like he's just really, really jacked up for the end of this game. And, he's just really giving his team a ton of support. I didn't know at the time he just had to go out there and be part of the 5 guys that were out there. I was like, oh, look at how great of a teammate Peyton Pritchard's being. He's like just trying to rally the troops for the last couple seconds.
Well, we got 2 more games before our next show. Those are, again, depending on when you're listening. But if you're listening on Monday, tonight against Washington. So the C's back at it, 7 o'clock. And then at home against Indiana, a 7:30 game on Wednesday. But 4 out of the next 5 are on the road. So this is a nice early season test for this team, obviously. Washington, Indiana, Brooklyn, Minnesota, Philadelphia. Philly maybe has James Harden in the lineup by that point. We'll see. But as far
I'm more afraid of the Pacers than I am of the Sixers. I'll tell you that right now.
Amen.
Considering
Pacers are awesome.
Real quick before we do sign off, considering it's 4 out of 5 on the road, and obviously the opponents I just mentioned, what are you happy with 3 and 2?
No.
Okay.
Depends.
I mean, listen, this team is going to be favored against everyone except the Nuggets. In basic,
the wear and tear, travel, like there are trap games. I'm just acknowledging they're probably not going to win them all. It'd be great if they do, but
4-1.
All right.
3 and 2 is like is fine. 4 and 1, I'm happy.
Yeah, it depends on
you're content with 3 and 2.
I can accept 3 and 2. 2 and 3, I'm like losing sleep and stuff. Yeah.
If you had to predict it, who's the loss? It's not Washington.
Oh, Indiana. Well, I don't even know the rest of the games, and it's Indiana. Yeah,
it's Washington, Indiana, Brooklyn, Minnesota, Philly.
Yeah, Indiana.
Tyrese Halliburton is the man.
Yes,
God,
exactly.
That guy's going to be tough, but I don't know. We'll see. I just think it's great that the Celtics have guys that play games, and some teams are already resting guys. I think it's awesome.
Wasn't it like?
I think it's great.
Jimmy Butler sat out for rest for the home opener.
Can we just let's not tempt fate too much? We're rooting for a team that has Kristaps Porzingis on it now. Let's just be polite and happy about what's going on.
Yo, I mean, look at Phoenix though. Beal hasn't played a game. Devin Booker's sitting out games.
Booker was nuclear in game 1 and hasn't played since.
It's it's brutal. It sucks.
But I thought the league said load management doesn't exist. I thought.
Is it possible?
Birds.
And I don't really say this with any hyperbole. Is it possible in the early goings of this year the league has a bigger problem than it's ever had? This is nuts.
Yeah. This has been the worst ever start for that kind of stuff.
They spent all this time and put in all these new rules and guidelines and manuscripts sent out to teams and putting in the in-game tournament later in the year, all these incentives and everything to solve this load management problem. And again, we're a week in, but it's worse.
What they always said? What they always said about the draft, anytime someone came up with a fix for the lottery to prevent tanking. Yeah. The criticism was
Aaron's wheel.
Well, the criticism was all this does is move the people like the wheel because this wasn't true. But the criticism always was it just moves the inflection point to a different place. For example, now you have teams maybe not tanking to get into 9th place, but tanking to get into 11th place or something, whatever it is. Is it possible? I mean, I think to your point, if you can't rest guys in certain national TV games and you can't rest guys in the in-season tournament games and there's probably further penalties coming down the road and then maybe after the All-Star game there's more guys you're not allowed to rest, is that why we're seeing so many early season load management games?
Yeah. I just love too that the league is making these teams come up with reasons, right? They there has to be a designation of some sort. They didn't know how the hell to handle the James Harden situation because he wanted to play and the team said, "No, don't come on the trip. We're good."
At some point, we're gonna get out general malaise.
It's just going to be the screenshot of Eric Bledsoe's "I don't want to be here."
I don't want to be here. Yeah. Oh my
god. Oh, unreal. All right, looking forward to Celtics basketball. By the way, if you're looking, it's non-Celtics, but if you're looking for another auto overplay in the gambling space early on in the year, take the over on Victor Wembanyama's turnover props. I'm not kidding. Take the over every time. 5, 4, and whatever he's got tonight. I guarantee it's more than 3. So it's going to be juiced. It probably goes up to 3.5. Doesn't matter. Keep riding the over until it doesn't hit.
Bob, did you see to keep this just gambling related for 1 second? Thanks to our sponsors over at FanDuel. We're going to go switch sports for just a second. A little Big Ten football. Did you see the over under for Iowa Northwestern this week?
Wasn't it 35?
It's the lowest over under in the history of college football.
Yeah.
Give me a number.
I think it was 35.5, wasn't it?
Seth, you got a number?
Is this football you're talking about?
Yeah, there's no chance he knows. Don't even ask him.
29.5.
29.5?
I think I still might take the under.
This coming weekend?
Yeah,
they can't make that line low enough for you.
There were a couple last weekend that were, I think, 35, which was insanely low as it was.
I'm going to hammer the under on 29.5.
Sub 30 for college football?
29.5.
I mean, teams there's 29 points in the first quarter of college football games.
Yeah, Virginia Tech almost put that up in the first half against Syracuse this week.
That's outrageous. That is absolutely nuts.
I think we can officially declare our Adam Himmelsbach comes back on this show this year dead. We can officially, that's done.
You ever notice that Syracuse doesn't suck until we make that agreement, and then it's just the season spiral?
2 years in a row.
Had the season even started when you made that agreement?
Yeah, What were they? 4-1.
They were 7-0. They were 6-0.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry.
Last year they were 6-0. We made the agreement. They managed to miss the bowl, I think, and then this year 4-1, and they've been getting shellacked.
Oh my god!
Like they're not even in games. They're not even showing up. It's unbelievable. But
we're the bad luck guys.
Got my hat. Hey, as long as the Celtics are perfect, stay perfect.
That's right.
Bruins should be perfect too.
I'm not
pissed away a game the other day, but that's okay. That's you literally can't win them all, and they'll just Celtics are going to keep trying until they can't. Obviously, for Evan Valenti, for Seth Landman, I'm Adam Kaufman. Thank you so much for listening. Rate, review, subscribe to this podcast, and remember, if you said that we are your favorite, just know you are ours as well. We'll talk to you again next week.